The pilot is over. The team has evidence, routine requests are easier to find, draft answers are more consistent. People report less time spent hunting through scattered documents. The executive sponsor asks the obvious question: when can we roll this out everywhere? That question is understandable. It is also dangerous when asked too soon. A pilot proves something narrow. It proves that one workflow may be useful with these people, these sources, these boundaries, and this level of support. It does not prove that every team is ready. It does not prove that exceptions will behave the same way at larger volume. And it does not prove that the controls designed for 10 people will hold for 1,000. Scaling is not the moment when an experiment becomes a product launch. It is the moment when an organization decides what must remain true as the work reaches more people, more cases, and more consequences. The wrong way to scale is simple. Buy more licenses, announce a launch date, and hope the pilot's benefits repeat themselves. The better way is more demanding. It asks, what made the pilot credible in the first place? Perhaps a frontline representative caught weak answers. Perhaps the workflow owner clarified an exception. Perhaps the team used only approved sources. Perhaps a small group met every Friday to compare what the system suggested with what the work actually required. When a company scales AI responsibly, it scales three things together. It scales the work system, what the assistant does, what the person does, and where exceptions go. It scales the control system, who can approve, change, pause, and investigate. And it scales the learning system, how feedback changes the way the work is done. If the tool scales, but those three systems do not, the organization has not scaled a capability. It has copied an uncertainty. The first scale gate is value. Before expanding, return to the question the pilot was meant to answer. Did it improve a meaningful outcome? Not simply activity, not simply enthusiasm, a meaningful outcome. In the service desk example, perhaps the goal was to help employees find approved information more reliably. The evidence should therefore include answer quality, time to resolution, correction or rework, user confidence, and the burden placed on the people who review difficult cases. This is where a simple baseline matters. Without one, a team can feel progress without knowing whether the workflow truly improved, or whether the work merely moved somewhere less visible. The scale decision is not, did people like the tool? It is, did this bounded use improve the outcome we promised without creating an unacceptable new cost? If the answer is unclear, the correct response may be another learning cycle. That is not failure. It is evidence discipline. The second scale gate is repeatability. A pilot can work because its first team was unusually experienced, unusually patient, or unusually close to the people who built it. That is useful to know, but it is not yet a repeatable operating model. To test repeatability, choose one comparable team, not a radically different department, not the biggest possible audience. Choose a team that performs similar work under similar conditions, but has its own real pressures and habits. Then ask whether the workflow can travel with its meaning intact. Can a new team understand the assistant's role? Do they know which sources are approved? Do they know what to verify, when to escalate, and where to ask for help? Is the support material clear enough for someone who is not in the original room? Repeatability is not the same as uniformity. The aim is not to erase local judgment. The aim is to make the boundaries, responsibilities, and learning practices clear enough that judgment can remain reliable in a new setting. The third scale gate is control. At small scale, people can solve many problems through conversation. At larger scale, an organization needs to know who has authority to make which decision. Who owns the workflow itself? Who can approve a new use case? Who decides what information may enter the system? Who can change the instructions, the knowledge sources, or an integration? Who receives a serious concern? And who can pause the system before a small problem becomes a repeated one? These questions are sometimes called governance. That word can sound abstract. In practice, Governance is much simpler. Who decides, on what evidence, and how quickly? Good governance does not replace frontline judgment with a distant committee. It gives frontline staff a visible route for raising concerns, gives managers clear decision rights, and gives the organization a way to act when a boundary has been crossed. The strongest controls do not live in a policy document alone. They live where the work happens. A scope boundary says which tasks, users, locations, inputs, and decisions belong in the current deployment wave. An access boundary says which tools and information are approved. An evidence boundary says when a proposed answer must be checked against a source before it can be used. An exception route says what happens when the normal path is not good enough. A change control process says how the organization alters instructions, sources, integrations, or workflow rules without silently changing the system's behavior. And a pause control makes it possible to stop using a capability when a serious concern appears. These are not signs that a company distrusts AI. They are signs that the company understands work. People already use boundaries, exceptions, reviews, and handoffs in high-quality work. AI should make those practices clearer and more usable, not hide them behind a screen. Clearly separate workflow monitoring from employee surveillance. A system can remain technically available while becoming operationally less useful. Perhaps the knowledge source has changed. Perhaps a policy was revised. Perhaps users start bypassing a review step because they are under pressure. Perhaps unusual cases are becoming more common. Perhaps the assistant still saves time, but the time saved has become extra work for the people who must check its answers. That is why scaling needs monitoring, not surveillance of employees, monitoring of the workflow, its outcomes, and its context. Look at quality and reliability. Look at corrections, overrides, and escalations. Look at workload and the experience of the people using the system. Look for changed patterns across teams or cases. And look for changes in the world around the workflow. New policies, new sources, new customers, new risks. The point is not to catch a system being wrong. The point is to notice when the assumptions that once made it useful no longer hold. Responsible scaling does not mean waiting forever. It means expanding in waves. Wave 1 reaches a comparable team with a local workflow owner. Then the organization reviews what changed. Did the quality hold? Did the new team understand its role? Did support requests reveal a missing step? Did exceptions expose a weakness in the original design? Then comes adaptation. Training may need revision. The exception route may need a faster response. A knowledge source may need clearer ownership. A boundary may need to become narrower before the next group is added. This rhythm may look slower than a universal launch, but it often reduces a different kind of delay, the expensive repair work that begins when a weak workflow is copied widely before anyone has learned how to manage it. The principle is simple. Do not scale a weakness merely because it can be copied. At regular intervals, the organization needs a governance review, not a ceremony, a real working meeting. The group should see the original problem, the latest evidence, the important exceptions, changes to the workflow, user feedback, and the decisions that need owners. The workflow owner should be close enough to daily work to recognize when the story told by a metric is incomplete. Frontline representatives should be able to raise concerns without being treated as obstacles to innovation. A useful review asks practical questions. Does this still solve the problem we named? Are people following the intended review path or creating workarounds? Has quality improved at the cost of workload? Has a policy, source, or dependency changed? Does the next deployment wave deserve approval, or does the design need revision first? Governance becomes real when a meeting can produce a clear decision, a named owner, a reason, and a future date to look again. At the end of a review, there are 4 valid decisions. It can revise the workflow, controls, training, or sources, and learn again. It can scale carefully to a new wave. Or it can stop. Stopping is not always a failure. A pilot may reveal that the use case is too unstable, that the source material is not ready, that the oversight cost is too high, or that the anticipated value does not justify the complexity. Knowing that early is useful. The danger comes when a company treats every pilot as an obligation to launch. Then the evidence meeting becomes theater, and people learn that raising a concern is pointless. A mature organization does something different. It treats a pause, a revision, a narrower scope, and a responsible stop as signs that the system is working, because the organization is still capable of learning from reality. A mature AI operating model is not a large control room. It is a set of everyday habits. Workflows have owners. Changes leave a record. People know what information belongs in the system and what does not. Reviewers can override a proposal. Teams know where an exception goes. Managers can see both the intended value and the unintended pressure. Leaders know when to pause, and they explain why. This is how governance becomes useful instead of heavy. The NIST AI Risk Management Framework describes a connected practice of governing, mapping, measuring, and managing risk. In everyday company language, that means assign responsibility, understand the real context, check what is happening, and act on what you learn. No framework can make difficult decisions disappear, but it can make the decision process visible enough to question, improve, and trust. The future of AI at work will not be decided only by which model is fastest or which vendor is loudest. It will be decided by whether organizations can build a reliable relationship between tools, work, and people. A good pilot shows that a small team can learn. Responsible scaling shows that the organization can keep learning when the stakes grow. That is the real capability. Not simply the ability to generate an answer, but the ability to decide what the answer is for, who must review it, where its limits are, what happens when conditions change, and when it is time to stop. The goal is not to make the organization more automatic. The goal is to make it more capable of acting with evidence, clarity, and responsibility. When you scale that, you are not just implementing AI. You are building a better way to decide.